Every TV show begins with so much promise, but how many actually fulfill it by the finale? I'm Bobby Meadows.
And I'm Angela Johnson Meadows. We're the couple that watches TV together. And this is How It Started,
How It Ended, where we revisit the first and last episodes of some classic TV shows and answer one question. Did they stick the landing? So Angela, what show are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about Everybody Hates Chris.
That's right, the semi-autobiographical tale of one of our favorite comedians, Chris Rock.
Yeah, we saw him in concert.
We did. We saw him a couple times. We saw him by himself. It was New Year's Eve one night.
Madison Square Garden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we saw him a few years ago when he opened for Kevin Hart.
Yeah, we have had a decades-long relationship with Chris Rock, even if he doesn't know it.
I believe the first time I saw Chris Rock was on this Comedians Showcase special, and then he joined SNL a few years later. Were you watching SNL when he was on there?
I think I was, although I don't really remember him. Was he only on for like a season?
He was on longer than that. His character was Nat X. That was his signature character.
I do remember that.
But he was on against Adam Sandler and David Spade, Chris Farley. So he was right in with those guys.
Yeah, definitely remember that. And so that was like late 80s at that point?
Yeah, 80s into the 90s.
Yeah, and then during that time he started to make his way in movies, and he was in New Jack City. Mm-hmm. Did you see that?
Of
course you saw that. Why was I even asking you that?
Yep, and then he was on Boomerang, and then he moved over to In Living Color for us. I think he was on In Living Color for a season.
Yeah, so he had some memorable movies and also some lines I think that people still to this day say, like, "Let me get one rib."
That's right. That was pretty good. I didn't know you did a Chris Rock impression, baby.
Well, thank you. I didn't know either. But hey, learn something new every day.
There you go. And I think what really pushed Chris over, because he was popular at the time, but I think what really pushed him over was his 1996 HBO special, Bring the Pain. Now that, I used to compare that with like Richard Pryor, the best of Richard Pryor, the best of Bill Cosby. And I remember telling my dad, you got to watch this special. Did you watch that?
I did. Yeah, I think that was when we really realized that he had what it takes to be a true comedian. His
humor was just so pointed and, dealing with race relations and O.J. Simpson. And then he had his HBO show, The Chris Rock Show. It was an amazing show. The sketch that has always stayed with me and probably many people is him trying to get Howard Beach, a very segregated community in New York City, to rename a street after Tupac Shakur. Wow. And I know we just watched that sketch, so you can definitely speak to it.
Yeah, I have to say I missed that show when it was airing in real time because I did not have HBO at the time, but yeah, I've been able to see some clips on YouTube and can see why he got the attention of television execs.
That's true. I mean, he has an incredible story where he grew up and how he rose from it. And so that's what Everybody Hates Chris talks about. And so I have to ask you, did you watch that show?
I watched a few episodes, but I didn't watch it from start to finish.
Same here. And yeah, I've wondered why. I do know when this show debuted, it was up against Joey.
Yeah, when did it debut?
It debuted in 2005, September 2005 on UPN.
Yeah, which might explain why we didn't see it from the beginning, because that would have been our first anniversary.
And we were out of the country at that time, so that could very well be why. I know that the network had pretty high expectations for this show. It was compared to Cosby, which of course was the biggest show ever back in the 80s. Everybody Hates Chris followed a similar path in that it was about an African-American family, though it was very different. But yeah, the network had really high expectations, and you have to imagine that part of that reason was because of this cast. Now, Tyler James Williams has, of course, blown up, but he was just a kid at the time. Were you familiar with him back then?
No, I had not heard of him. What about you?
No, No, absolutely. I definitely hadn't. But the two actors who played the parents, Terry Crews and Tashina Arnold especially. I mean, I first saw her in Little Shop of Horrors way back in the day. And then, of course, she played Pam on the sitcom Martin.
That actually might explain why I didn't watch this show, because I will confess I was not a fan
Oh, no.
of Martin.
Oh, no.
And I really didn't care for Tishina's character Pam, so that wouldn't have been something that would draw me to a new show.
She played the mom on the show, and then Terry Crews played Julius, the father, her husband. And I was familiar with Terry. I know he'd been in a couple movies that I'd seen. And, at the time he still wasn't that big yet, but now he's definitely huge, including Everybody Hates Chris. He's been on 3 shows that have had nearly or more than 100 episodes.
One of the things as we were prepping for the show that I thought was interesting is that there are the kids in the show. So there's Chris, there's his brother Drew, and his sister Tanya, and then also Chris's best friend, Greg. They were all 12 when they were cast in these roles, although they're all playing characters of different ages. So I just thought that was interesting. It's like it was a requirement to be 12 to be on this show.
Well, I think that's a good jumping off point. How about we pause and go watch the show, and when we come back, we'll talk about how it started.
All right, let's do this. Bobby, can you give the listeners a quick summary of what the pilot episode was all about?
Absolutely. In the pilot, what we see is Chris and his family, they open up their living in the projects, but very quickly they move to Bed-Stuy, which is supposed to be a better neighborhood, though the family quickly finds that in this crack era that there's really no safe space. And the mother is really concerned that Chris goes to a school in an all-white neighborhood, and she's like, those white kids, they get an education. So there's nothing that Chris can do about it. While his siblings get to go to the neighborhood school, he has to take 2 buses to Corleone Junior High School, a Godfather reference that I loved. This is in an all-white neighborhood where he's the only black student, and he immediately runs afoul of a bully, Joey Caruso, but also makes a friend, Greg. Meanwhile, at home, the pilot included a number of hilarious montages that really put on display the family life. Mom threatening spankings, dad worrying about money, Chris having to be in charge of his siblings. Really, the plot goes on, and all the hilarity stems from these really grounded, real situations that, again, make me wonder why we didn't watch this series.
I think what the show is setting up is that it's not just like this coming of age story about Chris, but it's also showing that Chris kind of doesn't feel like he fits in all of the worlds that he encounters. So at school, as you mentioned, he's the only black kid there and feels out of place. And then at home, he often feels like he's unappreciated, or that what he can contribute to the family can be overlooked. And so I think that is something that will play out as the show progresses.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. And you're right, because he's 12 or I think 13, right? Yeah, he's 13. He says that at the beginning. But he's got to be parent. And Drew's bigger than him, in which he hates. He says that's one of the worst things possible. So yeah, he seems like he's feeling like he's overlooked. And like you said, really unappreciated. Were there moments, any specific moments that you particularly liked?
I think, when I think back to that pilot episode, I don't know if there were specific moments, but there were things that that definitely resonated with me. So in 1982, I was like somewhere in that mix, a little bit younger than Chris, a little bit older than Tanya. So that world that they were inhabiting looked very familiar to me. I also attended a predominantly white school, so I understood what Chris was experiencing when he went to school. I unfortunately did not have the neighborhood to come home to where I would see people that look like me, but I do understand being in a world where you are one of one. And then I think one of the things that stood out to me, and I wonder if Chris really recognized this when he was a kid, or if this was more of a reflection that he had since being an adult and perhaps having his own children, is what he talks about. He notices that his father is only one of 4 fathers on the block. So He recognizes that his family is different than most families and that they are a 2-parent home. And that, while his father might have not said to him directly, "I love you," the fact that he came, and he says it in the show, like coming home from work was his father's way of saying, "I love you." That, and I think just everything that his father would do to make sure that his family had what it needed.
And you and I, of course, both grew up with our parents, married parents in the house with us. And so, I could certainly relate to that strong paternal figure in the house. I will tell you that, I found this pilot, I found the show just really, really delightful. I found it so appealing. I thought that Tashina Arnold and Terry Crews had really great chemistry as a couple. I thought the kids were, they weren't like, at least in the pilot, they weren't like smart alecky kids like you can sometimes get on TV. And I love that there was at one point, you mentioned the Wonder Years earlier. And one of the things that really struck me was Chris Rock is doing narration. I forgot to mention that in the pilot, that Chris Rock narrates this entire show. And where we see Chris and his brother and sister leaving the house, and we see Keisha, the girl next door, and Chris fantasizes about her. And Chris Rock narrates, the fantasy girl next door. And it made me wonder if she was going to be his Winnie Cooper, the love of his life that he pines for the duration of the series. But that's immediately undercut when she says hi to Drew. Chris, he talks about how that's Drew is his younger brother, but he's bigger than him, like you said, and he's cooler than him as well. So those, I love those dynamics, love them.
One of the things as I was watching it, and I was like, thinking to myself, I am really enjoying this show. Why didn't I watch this when it was on? Because it was really well done. And I think in a way that we had previously watched Family Matters, and I kind of sat through it because that was the show that we had picked to watch. But I didn't really enjoy watching those episodes. Whereas this one, I might watch the full series now.
I was seriously going to suggest we do that.
I think one of the things that I really liked about this show was that it wasn't kind of like that syrupy sweet, sitcom moments with the music. Now they did, I don't know if you noticed this, they did have some sitcom-y kind of music in certain places. But what played out in the show actually was almost counter that at times. But what I did appreciate was there was a scene where it's toward the end of the show, and Chris has had some challenges during the day where he has encountered a bully who's taken his lunch money, so he wasn't able to eat. So then when he got home, he was really hungry, and he ate his father's dinner. The bully also stepped on his shoes. So the shoes that he had borrowed from his brother, his good dress shoes, to where the school had been messed up. And so he used a towel to put shoe polish on them, which then obviously made that towel black. And there were moments when the mother, when she discovered this, she didn't yell at him. She sat down and had a really nice conversation and just said, next time don't eat the biggest piece of chicken.
Right.
But it is funny that then later on she discovers the issue with the towel, and she's like, what happened to my towel? But you also see that his father did the same thing, and he's the one who didn't have the food to eat and perhaps should have been even more upset, but also didn't yell at his son for making that choice. He kind of sat down with them and made sure he understood it. So in that way, it was a little bit Cosby-ish in the like my parents can be nice to me kind of thing, but it landed differently than if you had been watching Cosby or another show like that.
Yeah, and I think like, you certainly, because he spent the pilot has a montage of Tachina Arnold's character yelling 100 different ways she's going to beat the kids. So that there's some bite to that because this is still early 80s, so they're portraying it that way, which was. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I love the two scenes that you described with the parents sitting down with Chris and having conversations with him. And I love the button where she screams, "What happened to my child?" Because that actually, like you said, that ends the episode. All right, so I think that wraps it up for the pilot. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a look at the finale, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how it ended. Everybody hates Chris. All right, so we just watched the finale that aired on May 8th, 2009. Angela, why don't you let our listeners know what happened?
Sure. In this episode, Chris is now a sophomore in high school, and he's at risk of having to repeat 10th grade because he has had so many latenesses. So we see him struggling to be on time for the remainder of the school year. We also see Drew now has aspirations of being on Showtime at the Apollo, and Tanya is getting ready to graduate from 6th grade.
Chris now attends to Taglia High School, which is another Godfather reference. So I was so thrilled when I saw that.
And that completely went over my head because I have not seen any of the Godfather movies.
Which is still painful for me, but let's move on. I thought that the finale, it really felt like a continuation of the story. The characters are all familiar. Julius is still concerned with money. There's another montage about that. Joey, it opens with Joey, the bully, punching out Chris. And so that is something else that had never changed. He and Vincent are still, Greg, played by Vincent Martella, they're still buddies. And, Drew is still cool, going out for the Apollo. So this felt like a real continuation of the series.
Yeah, I think this is maybe unusual. I know maybe because it was only on for 5 seasons, but yeah, the entire core cast is the same, which I appreciated and also agree with you. Like I felt like I was watching a continuation of the show. I didn't feel like this had evolved or changed in such a dramatic way that I no longer recognized it. Although there were a few things that changed outside of the script of the show, and that, when we started watching the show, it was on UPN, and now it's on CW. And that's a change that happened actually in the second season, or before the second season, because UPN actually went away, and then it got picked up by CW. But, to me, it felt like the tone of the show was the same. The tight-knit family that we met in that first episode is still the same. And, Chris is still, having his challenges. He's just making it through adolescence as he was in the beginning. So, yeah, there was a lot of continuity there for me.
Yeah, definitely. And, he is still facing the racism, that, I guess, principal now who, was speaking jive, I guess, when his mom came in to talk with him, and he was like, "Mom, this is just what she does." And it's funny, but you definitely know he's still facing it. And the casting that I loved was when Drew was in the barbershop. You could tell that those were people who'd been on the show before. Ernest Thomas was there, Todd Bridges was there, and then there were other people whose names I just don't know, but I'm sure they were familiar characters.
One thing I appreciated about the guest starring roles with Todd Bridges, particularly with Todd Bridges and Ernest Thompson, is that they both were on sitcoms.
Right.
And both family-focused sitcoms.
True.
And so the kind of that tie-in, I appreciated that nod.
Right. And the montages continued just like they'd been in the pilot. This montage of all those guys singing "A House Is Not a Home."
Yeah, when they said they'd all been on the Apollo and they all sang the same song.
Right.
But glad that Drew did not go that route.
Yes. Drew was very cool. He played the bucket drums and then had dancers, and he got applauded. And it's really like some happy endings in many ways for a lot of the characters. Amani, as you mentioned, graduated 6th grade, but
That'd be Tanya.
Tanya, played by Amani. Sorry. I'm getting them mixed up. Amani Hakeem played Tanya. Chris is late to school one final time, and his principal tells him that he's going to have to repeat 10th grade. And he told his parents he was going to drop out, which is real life. That's what Chris Rock did, the actor, a comedian, did. He dropped out at the same time, which made me wonder a lot about this show, like how much of it was taken from Chris Rock's actual life.
Yeah, and when I read about the ending and saying that they kind of thought this was the natural spot to end, because this is where real Chris's adolescence really ended.
Right.
And so anything going forward from that, if you had kept Chris in school, and like that would start to be really fabricated stories that weren't based on his life.
Yeah, one other point about the pilot was the finale that carried over was the opening of the pilot was a scene where Chris is imagining being famous, and he walks into the club. He's dressed like Run DMC. He's got women on his arms, and so there was a level of fantasy, surrealness that they had, and it happens again in the finale when he gets to his school, and there's this massive shootout between the police and criminals. And he runs through it, and then he has to save a baby, and then he's accused of being a robber, and the police hold him at gunpoint and then let him go on. And so I'm wondering, is that surrealness? It must have been part of the show all along. And so I, once again, asking myself, why did I not watch this show? Because these seem to be my people.
One of the things I thought was interesting is how they decided to end the show.
Yes.
So the episode focuses on, once Chris has decided that he's not going back to school, somebody brings up the idea of him getting his GED. So he goes forward and he takes that test. And in the final scene where the family is gathered for dinner at the diner and they're wondering how he did on the GED, and then the father comes in with the envelope and he's like, yeah, I've got Chris's test results. And he opens the envelope and I think Chris says, oh, how'd I do? And then it just cuts to black.
Right.
And so you don't know. I mean, obviously we're going to assume he did fine, if this is semi-autobiographical, and, he went on to have a very good adult life. But it was very interesting that there was no closure with that. But that didn't bother me in a way that I think it might have in a different sitcom.
Or a different HBO drama, because many, many people, this was an homage to The Sopranos, which ended exactly like that. Yeah. And many people still hate that ending. And so when I saw it, of course, I immediately picked up on that. But I was also like, I appreciate the homage to The Sopranos, because that was just fantastic, because they're in the diner just like Tony and his wife were in The Sopranos. And there's that guy at the counter who appears kind of sketchy. Chris has his eye on him. And then he walks away, and like you say.
It's funny listening to you and your perspective and all these like Godfather and Soprano tie-ins. Like, I wonder if that was a consistent thing throughout the show. And it does seem like Chris is very heavily influenced by mob culture. Or is that all just coincidence?
Right. I wonder, is there a scene somewhere along the way where somebody's asking, am I a clown to you? Just like Joe Pesci in Goodfellas. I guess I will ask you this question. Maybe we already know the answer, but do you wish you had watched?
I do. I genuinely enjoyed the 2 episodes that we watched, and I think I would have enjoyed the series. And so, it's going back to that question. Why didn't I watch it? Because it was really good. Maybe obviously 2026 me is very different than 2005 me. So maybe at that point I wasn't ready for a show like this, but it does hit really well with me right now.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, I feel the same way. So I guess we have to keep our Hulu subscription for a while longer. And I guess I will ask you, your verdict. Does this finale stick the landing?
I think so. Yeah, I actually appreciated that everything wasn't wrapped up in a nice bow. I mean, we did have some closure, like, Tanya graduated from sixth grade. Drew did really well on the Apollo. But we did have that one point with Chris where we kind of don't know kind of his fate in that. But I'm okay with it. And I think I also appreciated that it was very consistent throughout the show that we watched in the pilot. It felt like we were watching the same show in the finale.
Yeah, and I also think it stuck the landing. There was another line around the GED when Chris is trying to explain to his parents. And he's like, Bill Cosby got his GED. And his mother says, you want to be a comedian? So yes, I feel the same way. I thought it stuck the landing and was really, really happy with this. So I guess that's it for Everybody Hates Chris until we turn on Hulu in a few minutes and watch episode 2. Thank you for hanging out with us. Again, I'm Bobby Meadows.
And I'm Angela Johnson Meadows.
Join us next time back on the couch for How It Started, How It Ended.
Because endings matter, especially to the people who stuck around.
How It Started, How It Ended is produced by Bobby Meadows and Angela Johnson Meadows for Ain't We Cute Media. You can find How It Started, How It Ended wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And you can follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram at How It Started _ How It Ended.